I was in the middle of grading a particularly uninspired stack of essays when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting a message from Finn about dinner plans. Instead, it was Mom. My thumb hovered over the answer button, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. I knew that whenever Delilah called, it was rarely good news. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Sawyer, darling," she began, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that always made me wary. "I have the most wonderful idea for your wedding." I could already feel the tension creeping into my shoulders. "Oh, well," she continued, "I was thinking, wouldn't it be lovely if Jasper walked you down the aisle? He is practically family now." I nearly dropped the phone. I felt the blood rush to my face, a mix of anger and disbelief. Jasper? What about Grandpa Harold? There was a pause on the line, a pause filled with the kind of manipulation only Delilah could master. "Oh, Sawyer, Harold is so old-fashioned." Jasper would bring a fresh energy to the ceremony. Fresh energy? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, Grandpa has been there for me my entire life. He's the one who should walk me down the aisle." Her tone shifted, becoming more insistent. "Sawyer, this is my chance to show everyone how our family is changing and growing. Jasper is important to me." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, this isn't about you. It's my wedding." The line went silent for a moment, and I could almost picture her fuming on the other end. "You always do this, Sawyer. You never think about my feelings." Her words stung, but they were nothing new. "I have to go, Mom. We can talk about this later." I ended the call, my hands trembling slightly. I looked around my classroom, the walls lined with posters of historical figures who had faced far greater battles than this. Yet, the weight of the conversation lingered, heavy and suffocating. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as if it held the answers. This was supposed to be a joyful time, planning a future with Finn, surrounded by the people who truly cared about us. But Delilah had a way of turning everything into a power struggle. Finn's support was my anchor, and I knew he would be there to help me navigate the storm. But the thought of confronting my mother about this, of all things, felt exhausting. I had spent so much of my life trying to keep the peace, to avoid these confrontations that seemed to crop up like weeds. The door to my classroom creaked open, and I looked up to see Finn standing there, his familiar grin easing some of the tension. "Hey you," he said, crossing the room to give me a quick kiss. "Hey," I replied, trying to shake off the conversation with Delilah. "How was your day?" He shrugged, pulling up a chair beside me. "You know, the usual. Code. Bugs, more code. You." I hesitated, not wanting to dump my family drama on him the second he walked in, but Finn had a way of knowing when something was off. "Sawyer, what's up?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's Mom. She wants Jasper to walk me down the aisle instead of Grandpa." Finn's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? What did you say?" I told her no, of course. But you know how she is. She made it about her feelings, her image. Finn nodded, a thoughtful look on his face. "You know, you do not have to give in to her, right? This is your day." His words were a balm to my frazzled nerves. "I know. It's just complicated." He reached out, taking my hand in his. "We will figure it out. Together." I squeezed his hand, grateful for his steady presence. But as much as I wanted to let it go, I knew this was just the beginning. Delilah would not back down easily, and the thought of the battle ahead loomed over me like a dark cloud. As Finn and I left the school, I could not shake the feeling that this was more than just a wedding squabble. It was a test of my resolve, of my ability to stand up for what I wanted, rather than what Delilah thought was best. And as we walked into the evening, I knew I had to face this head-on, because if there was one thing I had learned from history, it was that sometimes you had to fight for your own story. The drive to my grandparents' house was filled with the kind of quiet that only comes when you are bracing for a difficult conversation. I had not told them about Delilah's latest stunt yet, and the thought of dragging them into this mess made my stomach churn. But I needed their wisdom, their steady reassurance that I was not alone in this. As I pulled into their driveway, the familiar sight of the old oak tree in the front yard brought a sense of calm. Grandpa had planted it the year I was born, and it had grown alongside me, weathering storms and standing tall, much like Harold and Edith themselves. Inside, The house smelled of freshly baked cookies, a testament to Grandma Edith's love for nurturing through food. She greeted me with a warm hug, her eyes sparkling with the kind of understanding that only comes from years of knowing someone's soul. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, leading me into the cozy living room where Grandpa was already settled with a cup of tea. "Hi, Grandma." "Grandpa," I said, trying to muster a smile. Harold looked up from his newspaper, adjusting his glasses. "Sawyer, everything all right?" I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. "Not really. It's Mom. She called earlier." Grandma and Grandpa exchanged a knowing glance, the kind that spoke volumes without a single word. They had seen this pattern before, and it was as familiar to them as it was exhausting. "She wants Jasper to walk me down the aisle instead of you, Grandpa," I finally blurted out, unable to sugarcoat the absurdity of it all. Grandpa's face darkened, a rare flicker of anger crossing his usually calm demeanor. "Jasper? That man has no business being involved in your wedding." Grandma reached out, patting my hand. "Oh, darling, I am so sorry. This must be so hard for you." I nodded, feeling the weight of their understanding and support. "I just do not know what to do. She is not going to let this go." Grandpa leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. "Sire, you have every right to decide who walks you down that aisle. Do not let her pressure you into something that does not feel right." I knew he was right, but the thought of standing up to Delilah again was daunting. She had a way of twisting things, making me second-guess myself. "Thanks, Grandpa. I wish things were different," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Grandma squeezed my hand. "We are here for you, no matter what. And remember, your happiness comes first." Their words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of my anxiety. But as much as I wanted to believe everything would work out, a part of me knew that Delilah would not give up easily. Later, as I was leaving, Grandpa pulled me aside. "Sawyer, I have been meaning to tell you something. I got a call from Delilah last week. She was asking about some financial help." I felt a jolt of surprise. Delilah had not mentioned anything about money. "Did you give her anything?" He shook his head. "I told her we could not. But it seemed off, like she was desperate." This was new, and it added another layer to the tangled web Delilah had spun. Was this about more than just the wedding? Was Jasper pushing her for money? The questions buzzed in my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. As I drove home, I could not shake the feeling that there was more to Delilah's demands than met the eye. The pieces did not quite fit, and the thought of what might be lurking beneath the surface sent a shiver down my spine. Finn was waiting for me when I got home, his presence a welcome relief. "How did it go?" he asked, wrapping me in a comforting hug. I leaned into him, grateful for his steadiness. "It was good. They are on my side, but there is something else." Grandpa said Mom asked him for money. Finn pulled back slightly, a frown creasing his brow. "That is strange. Do you think Jasper is involved?" "I do not know," I admitted. "But it feels like there is more going on." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We will figure it out, Sawyer. Whatever it is, we will handle it together." His words were a promise, one that I clung to as the uncertainty of the situation loomed large. Delilah's actions were like a puzzle, each piece more puzzling than the last. And as Finn and I settled in for the night, I knew that uncovering the truth would be the key to finally putting this all to rest. Dinner at my grandparents' house was usually a comforting affair. Tonight, though, the air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. I sat across from Harold and Edith, the clinking of cutlery and the soft hum of their old radio filling the silence. It was time to share the full extent of Delilah's latest antics. "Grandpa, Grandma," I started, trying to find the right words. "There's something else you should know." They both looked at me, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. I took a deep breath, the weight of the truth heavy on my chest. "Mom asked you for money because she's in some kind of trouble. I think Jasper might be involved." Grandpa set his fork down, his brow furrowing. "What kind of trouble, Sawyer?" "I am not sure," I admitted, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "But it feels like she's being pushed into something. Maybe Jasper is behind it." Grandma sighed, her eyes filled with worry. "Oh, Sawyer, you have been through so much already." I nodded, trying to keep my composure. "I just do not know how to help her without getting dragged into her mess." Grandpa leaned back, a thoughtful look on his face. We will figure it out. But you need to focus on your wedding and your happiness. His words were meant to reassure me, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. It was not just about the wedding anymore. This was about Delilah's life spiraling out of control and the fear that it might pull me down with it. As we cleared the table, the doorbell rang, echoing through the house like a warning. I exchanged a glance with Grandma, who went to answer it. Moments later, she returned with Delilah in tow, her presence like a whirlwind that swept away the evening's calm. "Sawyer," Delilah said, her voice a mix of desperation and defiance. "We need to talk." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my emotions in check. "What is it, Mom?" She hesitated, glancing at Grandpa and Grandma before speaking. "I know you're upset about the wedding, but you have to understand, Jasper is important to me." I could feel the frustration rising, a tide that threatened to overwhelm me. "This is not about Jasper, Mom. It's about you trying to control everything." Delilah's eyes flashed with something I could not quite place. Fear, maybe. "I just want what's best for you." "Is that why you asked Grandpa for money?" I shot back, the words sharper than I intended. Her face fell, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I pressed, desperate for answers. She looked away, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "I made some mistakes, Sawyer, but I am trying to fix them." I wanted to believe her, but the years of broken promises and manipulation made it hard. "You need to be honest with me, Mom. I cannot help if I do not know what's going on." Delilah's shoulders slumped, a weary sigh escaping her lips. "Jasper, he got involved with some people. I thought it would be a good opportunity, but now." Her voice cracked, and I felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. "Now what?" "Now they're expecting money, and I do not have it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The room fell silent, the weight of her confession settling over us like a heavy fog. I glanced at Grandpa and Grandma, their expressions a mix of shock and concern. "Mom," I said, my voice softening, "you need to get out of this. Jasper is not worth it." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know, but I do not know how." The vulnerability in her voice tugged at something deep within me. Despite all the hurt and betrayal, she was still my mother, and I could not just stand by and watch her fall apart. "We will figure it out," I promised, though the path ahead seemed more uncertain than ever. As Delilah left, the tension in the room lingered, a reminder of the storm that was still brewing. I looked at Grandpa and Grandma, their unwavering support giving me strength. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Grandpa nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. "We are here for you, Sawyer. Always." As I drove home, the gravity of the situation settled over me. Delilah's troubles were deeper than I had realized, and the stakes were higher than just a wedding. This was about family, about breaking a cycle of chaos and finding a way forward. And as I pulled into the driveway, I knew that whatever happened next, I would face it head-on. Because sometimes, the only way to find peace is to confront the storm. The next morning, I found myself pacing the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee doing little to calm my nerves. Finn watched me from the table, a concerned look etched across his face. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor," he said gently, trying to lighten the mood. I stopped, running a hand through my hair. "I just cannot shake this feeling, Finn. There's something more going on with Mom and Jasper." He nodded, setting his mug down. "I know, but we will figure it out. Maybe you should talk to her again, see if she will open up more." I sighed, the thought of another confrontation with Delilah exhausting. I just wish she would be honest for once. Finn stood up, wrapping his arms around me. "You are doing everything you can, Sawyer. Do not forget that." His words were comforting, but I knew I needed to take action. The uncertainty of the situation was like a dark cloud hanging over everything, and I could not let it ruin the wedding preparations. Later that day, I decided to visit Delilah. Her apartment was a chaotic mix of bold colors and mismatched furniture, a reflection of her tumultuous personality. She opened the door, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Sawyer," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I did not expect to see you." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, we need to talk. I want to help, but I need to know the truth." She hesitated, glancing around the room as if searching for an escape. I told you. It is complicated. I crossed my arms, standing firm. Complicated or not, I need to know what's going on. Jasper is trouble, and I do not want you dragged down with him. Delilah's expression shifted, a flicker of something, fear, maybe, crossing her face. He is not all bad, Sawyer. He just got in over his head. And you are caught in the middle, I said, trying to connect the dots. What did he do? She bit her lip, her gaze dropping to the floor. He borrowed money from some people. I thought it was for a business deal, but now they are demanding it back. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. And they are threatening you? She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I did not know how bad it was until it was too late. I felt a surge of anger, not just at Jasper, but at the situation Delilah had allowed herself to fall into. Mom, you have to get out of this. You cannot keep covering for him. I know, she said, her voice trembling. But I am scared, Sawyer. I do not know what they will do if we cannot pay. The fear in her voice was real, and it tugged at my resolve. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and I could not just walk away. We will find a way, I promised, though I had no idea how. But you need to cut ties with Jasper. He is only making things worse. Delilah nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I will try. As I left her apartment, a new determination settled over me. This was no longer just about the wedding. It was about protecting my family, even if it meant making difficult choices. Back at home, Finn was waiting for me, his presence a comforting anchor. How did it go? He asked, concern lacing his voice. I sank into the couch beside him, exhaustion washing over me. She's in trouble, Finn. Jasper borrowed money from some dangerous people, and now they are threatening her. Finn's expression darkened, a protective edge to his voice. We need to do something. I know, I said, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. But I do not know where to start. He took my hand, squeezing it gently. We will figure it out together. Whatever it takes. His words were a lifeline, and I clung to them as the enormity of the task ahead loomed large. The stakes had never been higher, and the path forward was fraught with uncertainty. But as I sat there with Finn, I realized that sometimes standing up for what is right means facing the storm head-on, even when the odds are stacked against you. And as daunting as it was, I knew I had to fight for my family, for my future, and for the peace I so desperately craved. The morning was supposed to be a calm one, filled with last-minute wedding details and excitement. Instead, I found myself staring at the school parking lot, my mind racing with thoughts of Delilah and Jasper's tangled mess. The confrontation at school yesterday had left me rattled, and the whispers of colleagues had only added to the tension. I was about to head inside when my phone buzzed. It was Delilah. My heart sank, knowing this call could only mean more trouble. Sawyer, she started, her voice edged with urgency. We need to meet. It's important. I hesitated, glancing at the school entrance. I am at work, Mom. Can it wait? It cannot, she insisted, a note of desperation creeping in. Please, Sawyer. It's about Jasper. The mention of his name sent a shiver down my spine. I knew I had to go. Okay. I will be there soon. I told the office I had an emergency and drove to a nearby cafe where Delilah was waiting. She looked more frazzled than usual, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I slid into the seat across from her, bracing myself for whatever was coming. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Jasper's disappeared, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He took the money and ran. Now those people are looking for me. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. What do you mean he ran? What about the money he owed? She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. It's gone. All of it. And they think I know where he is. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. Mom, you need to go to the police. I cannot, she said, panic rising in her voice. They will come after me, Sawyer. I am scared. Her fear was palpable, and it stirred something protective in me. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and I could not just leave her to face this alone. We will figure something out, I promised, though the weight of the situation felt crushing. But you need to come clean about everything. Delilah nodded, her hands trembling. I will. Jess, please help me. I left the cafe, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Jasper's betrayal had pushed us into a corner, and I knew time was running out. As I drove back to school, I realized I needed to make a choice. Either keep trying to juggle everything myself or reach out for help. Finn was waiting for me when I got home, his concern evident. "You look like you have seen a ghost," he said, wrapping me in a hug. "It's Jasper," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's gone, and those people are after Mom." Finn pulled back, his expression serious. "We need to tell someone, Sawyer. This is getting dangerous." "I know," I admitted, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "But I do not know who to trust." He took my hands, his grip firm. "We will figure it out together. But you cannot do this alone." His words were a lifeline, and I knew he was right. I could not keep trying to shoulder this burden on my own. It was time to bring in someone who could help. The next day, I reached out to an old family friend, a lawyer who had helped us before. As I explained the situation, I felt a mix of fear and relief. Fear of what might come next, but relief that I was no longer facing it alone. The lawyer listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. "This is serious, Sawyer. We need to get your mother somewhere safe and start building a case." The gravity of his words hit me, the reality of the situation sinking in. "What about the wedding?" I asked, my voice tinged with desperation. He gave me a sympathetic look. "Focus on what you can control. We will handle the rest." As I left his office, I felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but I knew I was making the right choice. Delilah's actions had pushed us to the brink, but I was determined to find a way through. Back at home, Finn was waiting with a reassuring smile. "How did it go?" "Better," I said, feeling a newfound resolve. "We have a plan." He nodded, pulling me into a hug. "We will get through this, Sawyer. One step at a time." As I held on to him, I realized that sometimes justice is not about revenge or punishment. It is about protecting those you love, even when it means facing your fears and making difficult choices. And as daunting as it was, I knew I had to see it through to the end. The day of the wedding dawned with a deceptive calm. The sky was clear, and the sun cast a warm glow over everything, as if mocking the turmoil inside me. I stood in the bridal suite, staring at my reflection, the weight of the past weeks pressing heavily on my shoulders. Finn knocked softly before entering, his presence a balm to my frazzled nerves. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice full of warmth and reassurance. "Thanks," I replied, managing a small smile. But inside, I felt like a tightly wound spring, ready to snap at any moment. As the guests began to arrive, I tried to focus on the joy of the day, the love and support surrounding us. But the shadow of Delilah's troubles loomed large, and I could not shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Delilah enter the venue, her presence like a storm cloud rolling in. She was alone, her expression unreadable, and I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my chest. "Sawyer," she said, approaching me with a tentative smile. "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you." I nodded, unsure of what to say. The tension between us was palpable, a reminder of all the unresolved issues hanging over our heads. "Thank you for coming," I managed, though my voice was tight with emotion. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly. "I know things have been difficult, but I am here for you today." Her words were meant to be comforting, but they only served to remind me of the chaos she had brought into my life. I nodded again, feeling the weight of her presence like a physical burden. As the ceremony began, I took a deep breath, focusing on Finn at the end of the aisle. His smile was steady, a beacon of hope in the midst of the storm. Grandpa Harold stood beside me, his presence a comforting anchor. But just as I started down the aisle, a commotion at the back of the venue drew everyone's attention. Delilah was arguing with someone, her voice rising above the murmurs of the guests. I felt a jolt of panic as I realized who it was. Jasper, looking disheveled and desperate. He had returned, and his presence was like a bomb waiting to explode. "Delilah, you need to leave," I heard him say, his voice harsh and insistent. She shook her head, her voice pleading. "Jasper, please. Not now." The tension in the air was electric, and I felt the eyes of every guest on me, waiting to see how I would react. My heart raced, the weight of the moment pressing down on me like a vice. I glanced at Finn, his expression a mix of concern and determination. He nodded slightly, a silent message that we would face this together. Taking a deep breath, I turned to Delilah and Jasper, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. This is my wedding day. If you cannot be here to support me, then you need to leave. Delilah's eyes filled with tears, a mix of regret and resignation. Jasper opened his mouth to argue, but Finn stepped forward, his presence commanding. You heard her, Finn said, his voice firm. This is not the time or place for this. Jasper hesitated, his gaze flicking between me and Delilah. Finally, he nodded, his expression defeated. Fine. But this is not over. As they left, the tension in the room eased slightly, but the damage was done. My heart ached with the weight of everything that had happened, the chaos that had overshadowed what should have been a perfect day. Harold squeezed my arm gently, his voice low and reassuring. You did the right thing, Sawyer. I nodded, though my heart felt heavy with the knowledge that this was far from over. The ceremony continued, the vows exchanged with a mix of love and determination. But as I stood there, surrounded by the people who mattered most, I could not shake the feeling that the storm was not yet past. As the reception began, I found a quiet moment alone, the weight of the day pressing down on me. The idea of revenge or justice felt hollow, overshadowed by the desire for peace and resolution. Finn found me, wrapping me in a comforting embrace. We will get through this, he whispered, his voice a promise. And as I held on to him, I realized that sometimes the hardest battles are not fought with anger or vengeance, but with love and forgiveness. It was a lesson I was still learning, but one I knew I had to embrace if I ever hoped to find peace. The reception was in full swing, laughter and music filling the air as guests mingled and celebrated. I tried to lose myself in the moment, in the joy of finally being married to Finn, but the events of the day lingered like a shadow. I was talking with Edith when I noticed Delilah standing alone near the edge of the garden, her posture tense and her eyes scanning the crowd. My heart sank as I realized she was waiting for Jasper, hoping he would return. I excused myself and made my way over to her, my resolve hardening with each step. This had to end once and for all. Mom, I said, my voice firm. We need to talk. She turned to me, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and desperation. Sawyer, I know things have been difficult, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. No more excuses, Mom. Jasper is not coming back. He is not going to save you. Her face crumpled, the weight of my words hitting her like a physical blow. I just thought, maybe he would change. I shook my head, the frustration and sadness bubbling to the surface. He is not going to change, Mom. And you cannot keep waiting for him to. Delilah's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving her. I do not know what to do, Sawyer. I am scared. I took a deep breath, the enormity of the moment settling over me. You need to let him go. You need to start over. Her eyes filled with tears, a mix of regret and resignation. I do not know if I can. You can, I insisted, my voice softening. But you need to want it. For yourself. She nodded slowly, the realization dawning on her. I have made so many mistakes. We all have, I said gently. But it is never too late to change. As the words left my mouth, I felt a shift, a release of the tension that had been building for so long. Delilah's expression softened, the first glimmer of hope flickering in her eyes. I will try, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, a sense of peace settling over me. It was not a perfect resolution, but it was a start. Just then, a commotion near the entrance caught our attention. Jasper had returned, his expression wild and desperate. He pushed through the crowd, his eyes locked on Delilah. You cannot just leave me, he shouted, his voice echoing across the garden. Delilah flinched, but I stepped forward, my resolve unshakable. She is not going anywhere with you, Jasper. He sneered, his bravado faltering. You think you can just walk away? I will find you. Finn appeared at my side, his presence a steadying force. You need to leave, Jasper. Now. Jasper hesitated, his gaze flicking between us. The crowd had gathered, the tension palpable as everyone waited to see what would happen next. You are done here, I said, my voice unwavering. It is over. For a moment, Jasper seemed to consider his options. Then, with a final glare, he turned and stalked away, the crowd parting to let him pass. As he disappeared into the night, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The storm had passed, leaving a sense of calm in its wake. Delilah stood beside me, her expression a mix of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Sawyer. I nodded, the warmth of Finn's hand in mine grounding me. We will figure this out, Mom. Together. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and celebration, the tension of the day slowly fading into the background. As Finn and I danced under the stars, I realized that the true battle had not been against Jasper or Delilah, but within myself. I had faced my fears, stood up for what was right, and found a way to protect my family without losing myself in the process. It was not about revenge or justice, but about finding peace and moving forward. And as I looked around at the people who had supported me through it all, I knew that I was ready. Ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold, with Finn by my side and the strength of my family behind me. The days following the wedding were a whirlwind of gratitude and reflection. Finn and I spent our honeymoon in a quiet cabin by the lake, far from the chaos that had marked the lead-up to our special day. It was a time to reconnect, to savor the peace we had fought so hard to achieve. As we sat by the water, the sun setting in a blaze of color, I found myself thinking about everything that had happened. The battles fought, the truths uncovered, and the choices made. It was a journey that had tested me in ways I never imagined, but it had also shown me the strength I possessed and the love that surrounded me. Back home, life slowly returned to normal. I resumed my teaching, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of the classroom. Finn continued his work, always there with a reassuring smile and a steady presence. Delilah, true to her word, had started to make changes. She attended therapy, confronting the demons that had haunted her for so long. It was not an easy path, but each step she took was a step toward healing, and I was proud of her for it. One afternoon she called, her voice filled with a mix of nervousness and hope. Sawyer, would you like to join me for a session? I think it might help us both. I hesitated, the old fears and resentments whispering in the back of my mind. But I knew this was an opportunity for us to rebuild, to find a way forward that was not mired in the past. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I would like that. The session was emotional, a raw and honest conversation that laid bare the wounds we had both carried. Delilah apologized, her sincerity evident, and I found myself forgiving her, not just for her sake, but for mine. As we left the therapist's office, I felt lighter, as if a burden I had carried for years had finally been lifted. It was not a perfect resolution, but it was a beginning, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, I reflected on the journey we had all taken. The themes of revenge and justice had given way to something deeper, understanding, forgiveness, and the realization that true strength lay in vulnerability and love. One evening, as Finn and I sat on our porch, I shared my thoughts with him. I used to think that justice meant making things right, but now I see it's about finding peace, even if things are not perfect. He nodded, his hand warm in mine. You have come a long way, Sawyer, and I am so proud of you. His words filled me with warmth, a reminder of the love that had been my anchor through it all. Thank you, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of twilight, I knew that our story was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and struggle, but I was ready to face them, because I had learned that family was not just about blood, but about the connections we forged, the love we shared, and the strength we found in each other. And as I looked at Finn, at the life we were building together, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together, with courage and love. In the quiet of the evening, a lingering thought crossed my mind, a question that would remain unanswered, a reminder that life was unpredictable and beautifully complex. But as I sat there, surrounded by the peace I had fought so hard to find, I realized that the uncertainty was part of the journey, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And with that thought, I embraced the unknown, ready to write the next chapter of our lives, one filled with hope, love, and endless possibilities.
Life has a funny way of mixing the sweet with the bitter. That's how I describe my current life situation. I'm Emma, 27 years old, newly married to Jack, the kind of man who makes every day brighter. We live in a small house, a charming place really, left to me by my grandfather. It's our little haven, filled with love and the dreams of a future family. Jack and I, we're saving up, hoping to buy a bigger house someday. But for now, this place is our world. It's quaint, filled with memories of my childhood, and now of our life together. Then there's Jack's family. His parents, Mike and Susan, are decent folks. Mike's a bit stern, the kind who believes in hard work and responsibility. Susan, she's a sweetheart, always trying to smooth things over whenever there's a disagreement. But the real challenge in the family dynamic? That'd be Lily, Jack's younger sister. She's 24, living a life starkly different from ours. She doesn't work, spending her days hanging out with friends and living life at her own pace. Family dinners are often an interesting affair. Like this one Sunday, we were all gathered around the table at our house. Mike was in his usual form, lecturing Lily about getting a job. "Lily, you're 24. It's high time you started thinking about your future," Mike said sternly, barely looking up from his plate. Lily just scoffed. "Oh, come on, Dad. I'm doing just fine. Why rush life?" It was the usual script. Susan, ever the mediator, jumped in to defend her. "Mike, leave her be. She's still figuring things out." Mike's disapproval was palpable, but he let the topic drop. This was a recurring theme. Mike trying to push Lily towards independence, and Susan cushioning her fall every time. It's a tightrope walk in their household. Lily's relationship with work, or the lack thereof, wasn't just a topic at the dinner table. It was a family concern. And yet, there was this unsaid rule, not to push too hard, not to upset the delicate balance. Jack and I, we try to stay out of it. We've got our own plans, our own future to build. But sometimes, family issues have a way of spilling over, don't they? After that Sunday dinner, things started to change, slowly at first, then all at once. Lily began dropping by our house more often. Initially, it was just the odd visit here and there. But soon, it became a regular thing. Almost every other day, she'd show up, sometimes even when Jack and I weren't home. I remember one afternoon, I was in the middle of baking when I heard the front door open. In walked Lily, as if she owned the place. "Hey, Emma," she greeted cheerfully, sauntering into the kitchen. "Smells good in here. What are you making?" I forced a smile. "Just some banana bread, for dessert tonight." Lily didn't seem to get the hint. She plopped down at the kitchen table, watching me. "Cool. I'll stick around for a bit if that's okay?" It wasn't, not really. But what was I supposed to say? "Sure, Lily. Make yourself at home." The visits became more intrusive. Lily would help herself to food in the fridge, lounge on the sofa for hours, sometimes even borrow my clothes without asking. I tried to brush it off, told myself she was just being friendly in her own way. But one day, I reached my limit. I walked into the living room to find Lily sprawled on the couch, flipping through a photo album, one of our wedding albums. "Lily!" I couldn't hide my irritation. "That's private. Can't you ask before going through our things?" She looked up, seemingly unfazed. "Oh, relax, Emma. We're practically sisters. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine, right?" I sighed, trying to keep my composure. "That's not really how it works, Lily. There should be some boundaries, She just shrugged and went back to the album. I felt this wave of frustration, but I swallowed it down. No use arguing. Jack noticed the tension, too. One evening, after Lily had left, he found me sitting on the couch, lost in thought. "What's up, Em?" he asked, sitting down beside me. I looked at him, the words spilling out. "It's Lily. She's here all the time, going through our stuff. It's like we don't have any privacy anymore." Jack frowned. "I know, I've noticed. I'll talk to her, okay? She probably doesn't realize she's overstepping." I nodded, though I wasn't sure talking would help. Lily had this way of just brushing off any criticism, laughing it away like it was nothing. True to his word, Jack spoke to Lily a few days later. I wasn't there for the conversation, but he told me about it afterward. He said he'd been gentle but firm, explaining that while she was always welcome, she needed to respect our space and privacy. She took it well, Jack assured me. Said she didn't realize she was being a bother. She'll back off. I wanted to believe him, but there was a part of me that doubted things would change. And, as it turned out, I was right. The visits continued, and with them, the tension grew. It was like walking on eggshells in my own home, never knowing when Lily would pop up next. The situation with Lily escalated quicker than I expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon, one of those rare days when I had the house to myself. Or so I thought. I was upstairs, tidying up the guest room, when I heard a noise from our bedroom. My first thought was Jack had come home early, but a peek down the hall confirmed my worst suspicion. It was Lily. There she was, in our bedroom, rummaging through my dresser. My heart pounded with a mix of anger and disbelief as I watched her casually pull out my clothes, examining them as if she was in a store. "Lily, what the heck are you doing?" My voice was louder than I intended, echoing off the walls. She jumped, clearly not expecting to get caught. "Oh, Emma, it's just you. I was looking for something to wear tonight. You won't mind, right?" Mind? Of course, I minded. "Lily, this is not okay. You can't just go through my things like this. It's invasive and disrespectful." She rolled her eyes, a move that infuriated me further. "Calm down, Emma. It's not a big deal. I just wanted to borrow a dress." I felt my patience snap. "It is a big deal, Lily. This is my home, my privacy. You can't just barge in and take whatever you like." Her attitude was dismissive, almost mocking. "Geez, Emma, you're acting like I'm a thief or something. I'm just borrowing." I was about to respond when my phone rang. It was Jack. Taking a deep breath to calm my nerves, I answered, trying to sound normal. "Hey, Jack, what's up?" "Hey, Em, just checking in. How's your day going?" I glanced at Lily, who was still standing there, a defiant look on her face. "Not great, actually. We need to talk when you get home." After hanging up, I turned back to Lily. "You need to leave now, and don't take anything with you." She huffed, dropping the dress back into the drawer. "Fine, whatever. You're making a big deal out of nothing." As she stomped out of the room, I felt a mix of relief and frustration. This was more than just borrowing a dress. It was a total disregard for boundaries, and I knew it couldn't go on. That evening, when Jack came home, we had a long talk. I told him everything, not just about today, but about how Lily's behavior had been affecting me for weeks. Jack looked troubled. "I'm sorry, Em. I thought talking to her would help. I didn't realize how bad it was." "We need to do something, Jack. It's not just about the clothes or the food. It's about respect and privacy. She's crossing the line, and it's not fair to us." Jack nodded, his expression serious. "I'll talk to her again. I'll make it clear that she can't do this. If she doesn't listen, we'll have to limit her visits." Despite Jack's efforts to set things straight with Lily, our problems were far from over. In fact, they got worse. It started with small things: a missing pair of earrings, a scarf I couldn't find anywhere. At first, I thought I was just being forgetful, but then the evidence became too obvious to ignore. One evening, I was scrolling through social media when I saw a new post from Lily. There she was, grinning at the camera, wearing my missing scarf. My heart sank. It wasn't just forgetfulness. Lily was taking my things. "Jack, come look at this," I called out, holding up my phone when he walked into the room. He leaned over, looking at the screen. "Isn't that your scarf?" "Yes, it is," I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. "She took it, Jack. She's been taking my things." Jack's face hardened. "I'll talk to her. This is crossing the line." The next day, Jack confronted Lily. I wasn't there, but he told me about it later. He said he was direct, showed her the photo, and asked about the scarf. Lily's response was as infuriating as it was predictable. "That scarf? Oh, I must have grabbed it by mistake. I have one just like it." Jack didn't buy it. "Lily, it's not just the scarf. Emma's noticed other things missing too. This needs to stop." Lily shrugged, all innocence. "I don't know what she's talking about. I haven't taken anything." It was a stalemate. Jack believed me, but Lily was in complete denial. What could we do? We had no proof, just a strong suspicion. The situation put a strain on our home life. I felt violated, unsafe even. My own home didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. Every time I left a room, I wondered if something else would be missing when I returned. It wasn't long before another incident occurred. This time, it was a pair of sunglasses. I knew I had left them on the kitchen counter, but they were gone the next morning. And, as if on cue, Lily showed up later that day wearing a pair identical to mine. "Nice sunglasses," I commented, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. Lily looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. "Thanks. Got them a while back. Pretty cool, right?" I didn't respond. What was the point? It was clear she wasn't going to admit to anything. Jack was as frustrated as I was. "I don't know what else we can do, Em. If she won't admit it, how can we stop her?" I didn't have an answer. We were stuck in this cycle of theft and denial, and it was wearing me down. I started hiding my valuables, locking doors I never used to lock. It felt ridiculous, but I didn't know what else to do. The thefts were bad enough, but what happened one Friday night took everything to a whole new level. Jack and I were curled up on the couch, watching a movie, trying to forget our troubles for a while. It was late, maybe around 11 p.m., when we heard a commotion outside. Loud voices, laughter, the sound of a car door slamming. My heart sank as I peeked out the window. There, in our driveway, was Lily, looking tipsy, with a group of her friends. They stumbled towards the door, and before we could react, they barged in. Lily was leading the pack, a drunken grin on her face. "Surprise!" she slurred, as her friends filed in behind her, loud and unruly. Jack stood up, his expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "Lily, what the hell? It's almost midnight!" Lily just giggled, swaying slightly. "Chill, bro. We just wanted to hang out, have some fun." Her friends were already making themselves at home, one of them heading to the fridge, another cranking up the music on their phone. I felt a surge of frustration. "This is not okay, Lily. You can't just show up like this, especially not this late." Lily waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, come on, Emma. Loosen up a bit. We're just having a little fun." Jack's patience snapped. He marched over to the group at the fridge. "No, Lily, you need to leave. Now. This is our home, and you're disrespecting it." One of Lily's friends, a tall guy with a loud laugh, piped up. "Hey, man, no need to be a buzzkill. We're just partying a bit." Jack was seething. "I don't care. Get out, or I'm calling the police." The atmosphere shifted from rowdy to tense. Lily looked at Jack, her expression sobering a bit. "You wouldn't call the cops on your own sister, would you?" Jack didn't waver. "Try me. This is the last straw, Lily." There was a moment of standoff, then Lily sighed dramatically. "Fine, we're leaving. You're such a killjoy, Jack." As they filed out, the relief was palpable. Jack locked the door behind them and turned to me, his face a mixture of anger and worry. "I'm sorry, Em. I had no idea she would do something like this." I just nodded, feeling emotionally drained. "It's not your fault, Jack. But this can't go on. She's out of control." The incident at our home was a wake-up call. We knew we couldn't let Lily's behavior slide anymore, but before we could figure out what to do next, something unexpected happened. My dad, a police officer, decided to visit us for a few days. He had always been my rock, and I was grateful for his presence, especially now. He arrived on a Thursday, his old duffel bag in hand, and a reassuring smile on his face. "Hey, pumpkin," he greeted me, giving me a firm hug. "Thought I'd drop by and spend some time with my favorite daughter." I smiled, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "I'm your only daughter, Dad, but I'm glad you're here." The only unpleasant moment is Lily, who ran in for a minute, asking to go to the toilet. After a moment's thought, I let her into the house, not wanting to make a scandal in front of Dad. Dad was a man of few words, but his presence alone made me feel safer. He had a way of bringing calm to any storm. That evening, we had a quiet dinner, and I could tell Jack felt more at ease too. The next morning, things took a turn. Dad usually kept his wallet and a few personal items in a small pouch he carried. But when he went to grab his wallet, his brow furrowed in confusion. "That's odd," he muttered, searching through his pouch. "I could have sworn I had my card in here." Jack and I exchanged a look. "What's wrong, Dad?" I asked, a sinking feeling in my stomach. My bank card, it's missing. He sounded more puzzled than worried. We immediately called the bank and blocked the card. Just then, my phone rang. It was Lily. Her voice was loud and slurred, the sound of music and chatter in the background. Emma, why the hell did you block the card? I can't withdraw any money. My heart stopped. What are you talking about, Lily? The card, Emma. The one I took from your room. I was using it to buy drinks, and now it's blocked. I felt a mix of anger and shock. Lily, that wasn't my card. It was my dad's. He's a police officer, for God's sake. There was a pause, and then a nervous laugh from Lily. You're joking, right? That's not funny, Emma. Dad, she took your card, I said, turning to my father, who was now listening intently. He took the phone from me. Lily, this is Officer Williams. You need to return my card immediately, or there will be consequences. There was a moment of silence. Then the line went dead. Dad looked at us, his expression grave. I'll have to report this. It's a serious matter. Jack put his hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Dad. We had no idea she would do something like this. Dad just nodded, his face stern. I'll handle it from here. Don't worry. The reality of the situation hit me hard. Lily had stolen a police officer's card. This was no longer just a family issue. It was a legal one. I felt a mix of emotions: anger, disbelief, worry. What would happen to Lily now? This was a mess that she had created, and now we were all caught in it. The situation escalated quickly after Lily hung up the phone. Dad immediately got in touch with his colleagues at the station to report the stolen card. He was calm and professional, but I could tell he was upset. I never thought I'd be filing a report against my own daughter-in-law's sister, he said, shaking his head. But we need to follow procedure. Jack and I sat in the living room, feeling a mix of anxiety and disbelief. It wasn't long before we heard a knock on the door. It was 2 police officers, Dad's colleagues, who had come to take a statement. As they were wrapping up, another call came in. It was Susan, Jack's mom, her voice frantic. Emma, what's this I hear about Lily and a stolen card? Tell me it's not true. Jack took the phone, his voice strained. Mom, it's true. Lily took Dad's bank card and used it. The police are involved now. Susan sounded on the verge of tears. But she's family. Can't you just let it go? She made a mistake. Jack replied firmly. Mom, it's out of our hands. Dad's a police officer. This is serious. The situation reached its peak later that evening at the police station. Jack, Susan, Mike, Dad, and I were all there. Lily was in one of the interview rooms, looking small and scared. Mike was the first to break the silence. I can't believe she would do something like this. We've tried to raise her right. Susan was defensive. She's just a child. She didn't mean any harm. Dad spoke up, his tone even but firm. Stealing is serious, especially from a law enforcement officer. It's not just a family matter anymore. We were all waiting when Lily came out, accompanied by an officer. Her usual bravado was gone. She looked at us, her eyes welling up with tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't think it would be a big deal. Dad stepped forward. Lily, you need to understand the gravity of what you've done. This isn't just a simple mistake. Susan rushed to Lily, hugging her. It's okay, baby. We'll sort this out. But Mike had had enough. No, Susan. This is where we draw the line. She needs to learn. The officer cleared his throat. We can proceed with charges, or if the cardholder wishes, he can decide not to press charges this time. Dad looked at me and Jack, then at Lily. I won't press charges, but this is your last chance, Lily. Any more trouble, and it's out of my hands. Lily nodded, sniffling. I promise. No more trouble. The incident with the stolen card wasn't just a passing storm in our lives. It left lasting changes in its wake. After Dad discovered the amount Lily had spent with his card, Mike, Jack's father, had no choice but to cover the expenses. It was a hefty sum, and the tension it caused within the family was palpable. We gathered at Mike and Susan's house for what was supposed to be a regular family dinner. But the atmosphere was anything but normal. Mike sat at the head of the table, his expression stern and resolute. Lily, "I've paid back the money you took from Emma's father," Mike began, his voice heavy with disappointment. "But I want you to understand, this doesn't end here. You need to find a job and pay me back every penny." Lily, who had been quiet until then, suddenly erupted. "Pay you back? That's ridiculous. I can't believe you're doing this to me." Mike was unyielding. "It's time you learned to take responsibility for your actions. I'm not giving you any more money." The declaration seemed to push Lily over the edge. She stood up, knocking her chair back. "Fine! If that's how you want it, I'm leaving. I don't need any of you." The room fell silent as Lily stormed out. Susan, tears streaming down her face, stood up to follow her daughter. "How could you, Mike? She's our daughter." Mike's response was firm, yet tinged with sadness. "She needs to learn, Susan. We can't keep shielding her from the consequences of her actions." With a final sob, Susan left the room, leaving a heavy silence behind. In the months that followed, the family dynamic shifted dramatically. Susan and Lily moved out, renting a small apartment. Mike, though heartbroken, stood by his decision, believing it was for the best. Jack and I watched from the sidelines, hoping that Lily would come to her senses. However, occasional glances at her social media profiles told a different story. Pictures of nights out, new clothes, and the same carefree attitude. It seemed Lily hadn't learned much from the ordeal. As for Jack and me, the whole experience brought us closer. We learned the importance of setting boundaries and the value of standing up for what's right, even when it's tough. Our home became our sanctuary once again, a place of peace and respect. Looking back, I realized that every family faces its trials. Ours was a difficult one, filled with tough love and hard decisions. But through it all, we learned valuable lessons about responsibility, respect, and the sometimes painful process of growing up. My life at 38 wasn't quite what I had envisioned. Sitting alone in our living room, surrounded by the quietness of our spacious home, I couldn't help but reflect on the past decade. My name is Emma, and this is the story of a dream that remained just that, a dream. Michael and I met in our late 20s. He was everything I had hoped for in a partner, kind, understanding, and with a sense of humor that could lighten even the darkest days. We married within a year of meeting, full of love and hopes for a future that included children, laughter, and shared memories. From the beginning, we were eager to start a family. But as months turned into years with no success, our optimism slowly began to wane. We tried everything: doctors, treatments, endless tests. But the result was always the same. Nothing worked. The unspoken disappointment grew heavier with each passing day. Our families, especially Michael's, were less than supportive. His mother, a stern woman with traditional beliefs, made her opinions loudly known. "You need to carry on the family line," she would often say, her words like daggers to my already fragile heart. "Adoption is not an option. We need our own blood." Her disapproval was a constant pressure, a reminder of my failure to fulfill the one role she deemed essential. I still remember the day Michael and I discussed adoption. We were sitting in our kitchen, the morning light casting hopeful glimmers across the table. But even as we spoke of names and nursery colors, I saw the hesitation in his eyes, the unspoken fears of going against his family's wishes. That conversation, full of hope, ended in silence, the dream of adoption fading away like a mirage. Our marriage, once a source of strength and comfort, began to feel the strain. Conversations grew shorter, nights lonelier. I could feel Michael drifting away, his once warm gaze now often clouded with unspoken thoughts. One evening, as I walked past our home office, I overheard a conversation that would change everything. Michael's voice, usually so calm, was tinged with a tension I'd never heard before. His mother's voice, on the other end of the phone, was insistent. "Michael, you need to think about your future. You can't waste your life with a woman who can't give you children. It's time to find someone young, someone healthy," she said, her words like a cold, piercing wind. There was a pause, and I held my breath, waiting, hoping for Michael to defend our love, our marriage. But his response was a heart-shattering silence, followed by a hesitant, "I'll think about it, Mom." That moment, hidden in the shadows of our hallway, a part of me shattered. The uncertainty in Michael's voice, the lack of immediate rejection of his mother's cruel suggestion, spoke louder than any words of reassurance he had ever given me. The realization that my marriage, my dream of a family, was hanging by a thread was a painful awakening. As I quietly retreated to our bedroom, the harsh truth settled in. Our journey to have a child had not just been a battle against infertility. It had become a battle for my marriage, a battle that, unbeknownst to me, I was already losing. Lying awake in bed that night, I couldn't escape the echoing words of the conversation I had overheard. The next morning, I found myself mechanically preparing breakfast, the silence between Michael and me more pronounced than ever. "Michael, we need to talk," I said, breaking the silence as we sat at the breakfast table. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of sadness and resignation. "I know, Emma. After last night, I know. I overheard your conversation with your mother," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Michael's expression changed to one of shock and then guilt. "Emma, I didn't mean for you to hear that." "But I did, Michael, and it hurts, knowing that you're even considering it," I replied, trying to hold back my tears. He reached across the table, his hand hesitating before touching mine. "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm lost. I don't know what to do anymore." I withdrew my hand, feeling a chasm growing between us. "I've made an appointment with a new specialist, Dr. Simmons. They say he's the best in fertility treatments. I want to try, one last time." Michael nodded slowly. "Okay, Emma. If that's what you want, I'll support you." The appointment with Dr. Simmons was filled with a mix of hope and dread. His office was clinical and impersonal, much like the news he delivered. "I've reviewed your previous tests and treatments," Dr. Simmons began, his voice steady and professional. "I'm afraid the likelihood of you conceiving is less than 1%. The finality in his words hit me like a physical blow. "So, there's no chance?" I asked, clinging to a sliver of hope. Dr. Simmons sighed. "It's highly unlikely, Emma. I'm sorry." I sat there, numb, the dreams of motherhood dissolving around me. Michael reached for my hand, a gesture of support, but it felt empty, devoid of the connection we once shared. On the drive home, we spoke little. The air was thick with unspoken words and broken dreams. Back home, I found the courage to voice the thought that had been haunting me. "Michael, if you want to leave, to find someone else, I won't hold it against you." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Emma, I never wanted this to be about choosing. I love you, but I also want a family, and I don't know if I can let go of that dream." His words were like a confirmation of what I already knew. Our marriage was at its breaking point, not because of lack of love, but because of unfulfilled dreams. In that moment, I realized that sometimes love isn't enough to bridge the gap between two people's needs and desires. And as the sun set on that day, so did it on the life we had built together, leaving us at a crossroads, uncertain of what lay ahead. The days following our conversation blurred into each other, each as hollow and heavy as the last. The decision to divorce, once spoken into existence, loomed over us like an inevitable storm. We moved through the motions, packing and dividing our shared life with a somber efficiency. I temporarily moved in with my sister Lily, who had always been my rock. Her small apartment was a stark contrast to the home I had shared with Michael, but it was a welcome haven in the storm of my life. "Emma, you know you can stay as long as you need, right?" Lily said one evening as we sat in her living room, a half-empty pizza box on the coffee table. I nodded, managing a small smile. "Thanks, Lil. I don't know what I'd do without you." She reached over, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You're stronger than you think, Em. You'll get through this." But as comforting as her words were, I couldn't shake off the feeling of failure, of a future slipping through my fingers. A month after the divorce, I attended a party hosted by mutual friends of Michael and me. I had debated whether to go, but Lily insisted it would be good for me to get out. The party was in full swing when I arrived, and I did my best to mingle, to smile and engage in small talk. Then I saw him. Michael was there, across the room, laughing at something a young woman said to him. My heart clenched at the sight. He looked the same, yet different, lighter somehow. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up and our eyes met. For a moment, everything else faded. He excused himself from the conversation and made his way over to me. Emma, he greeted, his voice a familiar melody that stirred old feelings. Michael, I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. It's good to see you, he said, and I wondered if he really meant it. You too, I lied, the words tasting bitter. We stood awkwardly for a moment before he spoke again. How have you been? I'm getting by, I said, shrugging slightly. And you? He nodded. Yeah, same. Getting by. The conversation that followed was a dance around the past, careful and measured. We talked about work, about mutual friends, about everything except the elephant in the room, our failed marriage. I should get going, I said eventually, the weight of his presence becoming too much. Right. Yeah, of course, Michael replied, his eyes holding mine for a moment longer than necessary. I turned and walked away, each step feeling heavier than the last. As I left the party, I couldn't help but feel like I was leaving a part of myself behind, a part that belonged to a different life, a different Emma. A few weeks after the party, Michael called me out of the blue. Hearing his voice again sent a jumble of emotions through me. Hey, Emma, I was wondering if we could meet up. There's something I need to talk to you about, Michael said, sounding hesitant. Curiosity got the better of me. Sure, Michael. Where do you want to meet? How about the cafe where we used to go on Saturdays? He suggested. The cafe was a place filled with memories of laughter and shared dreams. Sitting across from Michael in the familiar setting felt surreal. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup. Emma, I've been doing a lot of thinking, he started. About us, about everything that happened. I waited, not sure where this was leading. I regret how things ended between us. I wanted to say I'm sorry. He continued, his eyes meeting mine. His apology was sincere, but it opened old wounds. I appreciate your apology, Michael, but it doesn't change what happened, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded, looking down. I know, I was hoping we could spend some time together. One last night, to say goodbye properly. His suggestion took me by surprise. I don't know if that's a good idea, Michael. I understand if you don't want to, he said quickly. I just thought, maybe it could give us both some closure. The idea of spending one last night with Michael was tempting and terrifying all at once. Part of me longed for that final goodbye, while another part feared the reopening of barely healed wounds. Okay, Michael, one last night, I agreed, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. We decided to meet at a hotel, neutral ground for both of us. Walking into the room that night, I felt a nervous anticipation. Michael was already there, standing by the window. Emma, he said softly as he turned to face me. Michael, I replied, my heart racing. We talked, reminisced, made out, and for a brief moment, it felt like old times. But beneath the laughter and familiar banter, there was an underlying sadness, a recognition of what we had lost. As the night of love wore on, we both knew it was a final farewell, a last chapter in our shared story. When morning came, we parted ways, a silent agreement that this was the end. I left the hotel with a heavy heart, knowing that whatever we had once shared was now truly in the past. Leaving the hotel that morning felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. I was determined to leave the past behind and focus on rebuilding myself. A few weeks later, I made the decision to move to a new city. The idea of a fresh start was both daunting and exhilarating. Packing up my things, I found myself thinking about all the memories, both good and bad, that I was leaving behind. Lily came over to help, her presence a comforting constant in my life. You sure about this, Em? Lily asked, as she folded a sweater of mine. Yeah, I need this change, Lil. I need to find myself again, I replied, sealing a box with tape. Lily nodded, understanding. You know I'm just a phone call away, right? I know, and I can't thank you enough, I said, giving her a grateful smile. The move was a whirlwind of activity. Settling into my new apartment, starting a new job, and exploring the city kept me busy. It was liberating to be in a place where no one knew my past, where I could be just Emma, not Emma with the sad story. A month into my new life, I started feeling unwell. Thinking it was just stress or maybe a bug, I ignored it at first. But when it didn't go away, I decided to see a doctor. Sitting in the doctor's office, I felt a sense of unease. When the doctor came in with my test results, her expression was kind but serious. "Emma, you're pregnant," she announced. The words hit me like a tidal wave. Pregnant? How? Michael and I had been trying for years without a hint of success. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Yes, the tests are quite clear. Congratulations," she said, mistaking my shock for joy. Walking home from the doctor's office, my mind was a whirlpool of emotions. Pregnant. The word echoed in my head, a mix of disbelief and fear. How was I going to do this alone? I called Lily as soon as I got home. "Lil, I'm pregnant," I blurted out. There was a pause on the other end. "Oh my God, Emma, are you okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I never expected this, not now." Lily was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I repeated, "but I think I'm going to keep the baby." The decision to raise the child on my own was terrifying, but there was a part of me that felt a strange sense of purpose. This baby, a miracle in its own right, was a part of me, and I was determined to give it the best life I could. As I lay in bed that night, I placed a hand on my stomach, a promise to myself and to the little life growing inside me. This was my new beginning. As my pregnancy progressed, I settled into a routine in my new city. The early stages were tough, with morning sickness and a constant state of tiredness, but I managed. I didn't tell anyone at my new job about my pregnancy. I wasn't ready to share my story or face the questions that would inevitably come. Lily was my main support during this time. We talked almost every day, and she was always there to listen and offer advice. "Have you thought about telling Michael?" Lily asked during one of our phone calls. I sighed, sitting down on my couch. "I've thought about it, but what would be the point? He's moved on, Lil, and I don't want anything from him." "But he's the father, Emma. Doesn't he have the right to know?" She pressed gently. "Maybe he does, but I'm choosing to do this on my own. This baby is mine, and I don't want to complicate things by bringing Michael back into my life," I explained, feeling a mix of determination and fear at the prospect. Lily didn't push further, understanding my decision even if she didn't fully agree. As my belly grew, so did my excitement and nervousness about becoming a mother. I decorated a small nursery, picking out each item with care. The reality of my situation hit me sometimes. I was going to be a single mother, something I never imagined for myself. But each kick and flutter from the baby inside me strengthened my resolve. The day I went into labor was a whirlwind. I called Lily, and she managed to get on the first flight out to be with me. The labor was long and exhausting, but when I held my daughter, Ava, for the first time, every pain and worry melted away. She was perfect, a tiny miracle in my arms. "Look at her, Lil. She's beautiful," I whispered, tears of joy streaming down my face. "She really is, Emma. You did amazing," Lily replied, her own eyes misty. Life with Ava was a beautiful, chaotic mess. Sleepless nights, endless diapers, and a constant worry if I was doing everything right. But every smile, every giggle from Ava made it all worth it. I kept to myself, not wanting to delve into my past with new acquaintances or colleagues. My world revolved around Ava, and I was content with that. I celebrated her milestones alone or with Lily, documenting them in a scrapbook I kept. As Ava grew into a toddler, her personality started to shine. She was curious and full of laughter, a constant source of joy and love. Walking with her in the park, pushing her on the swings, I often thought about how different life was from what I had planned. But looking at Ava, I knew I wouldn't change a thing. She was my world now, and I was determined to give her the best life, a life filled with love and happiness, even if it was just the two of us. 3 years had passed since Ava's birth, and she was now a bubbly, energetic toddler. One sunny afternoon, we were at the park, Ava playing on the swings, her laughter filling the air. I was pushing her gently, lost in the moment, when a voice behind me said, "Emma?" I turned around, and my heart skipped a beat. It was Michael, looking much the same as he did the last time I saw him, but with a few more lines around his eyes. "Michael," I replied, surprised. "What are you doing here?" I'm here on a business trip. I was just walking and saw you here," he explained, his gaze shifting to Ava on the swings. "She's beautiful," he said, watching her with a soft expression. "What's her name?" "Ava," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause as he looked at me, a question in his eyes. "She's yours?" "Yes, she's mine," I said firmly, avoiding his gaze. "Emma, is she—" He hesitated, the unspoken question hanging in the air. I knew what he was asking. The timing would make sense to him, but I wasn't ready to open that door. "She's just mine, Michael." He nodded, though I could tell he wasn't convinced. "She looks happy. You look good, Emma." "Thanks," I said, not sure how to respond. "We should get going. Ava's probably tired." Michael stepped aside as I took Ava's hand and started walking away. "Emma, wait," he called out. I stopped but didn't turn around. "Yes?" If you ever need anything or want to talk, I'm here," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of regret and longing. "Thank you, Michael, but we're doing just fine," I replied without looking back. A few weeks after the encounter in the park, I received a call from Michael. My heart raced as I answered, unsure of what to expect. "Emma, I need to talk to you. It's important." Michael's voice was earnest. "Okay, Michael, what is it?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we meet? There's something I need to say in person," he insisted. We agreed to meet at a small cafe the next day. Sitting across from Michael, I braced myself for what he was about to say. "Emma, I know Ava is my daughter," he began, his gaze unwavering. I felt a lump in my throat. "How did you—" "Lily told me," he said softly. "I ran into her a few days ago. She thought I knew." I was at a loss for words. I had wanted to protect Ava, to shield her from any potential heartache. "Emma, I'm not angry, I'm just surprised, and I wish I had known sooner," he continued. "I was scared, Michael. I didn't know how you'd react, or if you even wanted to be a part of her life," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I understand why you did it, but I wish you had given me a chance. I would have wanted to be there, for both of you," he said earnestly. The conversation that followed was long and emotional. We talked about the past, about our feelings, and about Ava. By the end of it, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Michael wanted to be a part of Ava's life, and I realized that I wanted that too, for her sake. Over the next few months, Michael slowly became a part of our lives. He was great with Ava, and she took to him quickly. Watching them together, I saw what could have been and what still might be. One day, while Ava was napping, Michael and I had a moment to ourselves. "Emma, these past few months have been eye-opening," he said, taking my hand. "I've realized how much I missed you, how much I still care." I looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity in them. "Michael, He squeezed my hand. "I'm not asking for everything to change overnight, but I want to try for Ava and for us. If you're willing." I felt a mix of fear and hope at his words. The thought of getting back together was daunting, but there was a part of me that never stopped caring for Michael. "Let's take it slow, see where things go," I suggested, my heart fluttering with a cautious optimism. "That's all I'm asking," he replied, smiling. As we started to navigate this new chapter, I realized that life rarely goes as planned. But sometimes, it gives you a second chance, a chance to make things right. Michael, Ava, and I were finding our way together, building something new from the remnants of the past. It wasn't going to be easy, but as I looked at the two of them, I knew it was worth every effort. Life had thrown us a curveball, but it had also given us a rare opportunity, a second chance at a family. It's hard to believe how fast time flies. Just a few years ago, I was a college student, juggling exams and part-time jobs. And now, here I am, Laura Carter, 25 years old, about to marry the love of my life, Michael Richardson. Michael, with his kind eyes and easy smile, is someone I still can't believe I'm lucky enough to be with. He's from a well-off family, a fact that never really mattered to me, but it does mean our wedding is going to be something out of a fairy tale. Well, his mother's version of a fairy tale anyway. I was in our soon-to-be shared apartment, flipping through a wedding magazine when Michael walked in. "Hey, Laura, you won't believe the florist's latest idea for the centerpieces," he said, his voice filled with a mix of amusement and mild disbelief. I looked up and laughed. "Let me guess, something extravagant and probably totally impractical?" Michael flopped down next to me, nodding. "You got it. But hey, if it makes my mom happy?" That was Michael, always trying to keep the peace, especially when it came to his family. I admired that about him. Speaking of his family, there was a part I was nervous about. His sister, Sarah, who I hadn't met yet, was coming to the wedding with her new husband. Michael's mom, Mrs. Richardson, had let slip a bit of juicy gossip about Sarah in one of our wedding planning sessions. Sarah, who was in her mid-30s, had recently divorced her first husband and remarried a guy who was my age, only 25. That little tidbit had certainly raised my eyebrows. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. Michael got up to answer it. "That must be the delivery I was waiting for," he said. As I was flipping through another page of the magazine, Michael came back, holding a small package. "It's from my sister," he said, handing it to me. "She sent a little something for the wedding." I opened the package to find a beautiful silver bracelet with a note attached. "To Laura, looking forward to finally meeting you. Love, Sarah." "That's really sweet of her," I said, genuinely touched. "Yeah, Sarah can be really thoughtful," Michael replied, with a hint of something in his voice that I couldn't quite place. "You'll like her, I'm sure." The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of last-minute preparations and family arrivals. Michael's family mansion, where the wedding was to be held, was bustling with activity. Amidst all this, I tried to keep my cool, focusing on the joy of marrying Michael rather than the stress of the event. It was 2 days before the wedding when Sarah and her husband were scheduled to arrive. I felt a mix of excitement and nerves at the thought of finally meeting them. Michael had told me bits and pieces about his sister, but I had no idea what to expect from her husband. The sound of a car pulling up the driveway announced their arrival. Michael and I went out to greet them. Sarah stepped out of the car first, a tall woman with a confident air about her. She greeted us with warm hugs. "Laura, it's so wonderful to finally meet you," Sarah exclaimed, her smile genuine. "I've heard so much about you." "It's great to meet you too, Sarah," I replied, feeling a little relieved at her friendliness. Then he got out of the car. My heart stopped for a second. It was Jack. Jack Thompson, the guy from college who made my life a nightmare. But how? How could he be here, married to Michael's sister? I must have gone pale because Michael looked at me with concern. "Laura, are you okay?" I forced a smile, not wanting to make a scene. "Yeah, just a bit overwhelmed with everything." Jack hadn't noticed me yet. He was busy getting their bags from the car, but then he looked up and our eyes met. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, quickly masked by a polite smile. "Laura, this is Jack, my husband," Sarah introduced us, oblivious to the silent exchange between us. I managed a weak smile, extending my hand for a handshake. "Nice to meet you, Jack." Jack's grip was firm, his eyes studying me. "Likewise, Laura." The rest of the introduction was a blur. I excused myself quickly, mumbling something about needing to check on the caterers. Once out of sight, I leaned against the wall, my mind racing. How could Jack be here, in my life again, and as part of my soon-to-be family? I needed to talk to someone, but who? Michael? No, I couldn't burden him with this just days before our wedding. My dad? Maybe, but he was already dealing with so much as the police chief. Lost in thought, I didn't notice Michael had followed me. "Laura, seriously, what's wrong? You've been off since Sarah and Jack arrived." I looked up at him, torn between telling him the truth and keeping it all inside. "It's just wedding nerves, you know?" Everything's happening so fast. Michael studied me for a moment, then pulled me into a hug. Whatever it is, we'll get through it together. You know that, right? I nodded, resting my head on his shoulder. I know. But inside, I knew this was just the beginning. The past I thought I had left behind was now standing right in front of me, threatening the future I had so carefully built. Lying awake in bed, the memories of college came flooding back. It was a time shadowed by Jack's relentless pursuit. He was everywhere, in the library, the cafeteria, even waiting outside my classes. His initial infatuation, masked as sweet gestures and love notes, soon turned sour when I made it clear I wasn't interested. I still remember the day he crossed all boundaries, the day he tried to force his way into my dorm room. That was the day I realized this wasn't just some college crush gone wrong. It was something far more sinister. The fear from that day hadn't left me, even after all these years. Feeling restless, I slipped out of bed and walked to the living room, my thoughts a turbulent sea. The clock on the wall ticked away the early hours of the morning as I dialed my dad's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "Dad, it's me. I need to tell you something," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Laura? What's wrong, honey?" Concern laced his words. "Dad, Jack Thompson is here. He's married to Michael's sister. He's the same guy from college, the one who stalked me." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Laura, are you okay? Did he try anything?" "No, nothing like that. But just seeing him again, it's brought it all back, Dad." "Laura, you need to tell Michael about this, and his family too. They should know what kind of man Jack really is." I bit my lip, considering his words. It made sense, but the thought of dredging up the past, especially now, filled me with dread. "Dad, I don't know if I can. What if it ruins everything? The wedding is tomorrow." "Laura, I understand you're worried, but this is important. You can't just pretend everything is okay." I sighed, a knot forming in my stomach. "I know, Dad. I need some time to think about how to handle this." "Okay, sweetheart. But remember, I'm here for you, no matter what." "Thanks, Dad. I love you." "Love you too, Laura. Be safe." I hung up the phone and sat there in the dark, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders. I knew what my dad said made sense, but the idea of bringing up my past, potentially disrupting the delicate balance of our soon-to-be family, was overwhelming. As dawn broke, bringing light to a new day, I made a decision. I would keep this to myself, at least for now. The wedding was too important to Michael and his family. I couldn't let my past with Jack ruin it. I would deal with it after the wedding somehow. But for now, the secret would stay with me. The day before the wedding was hectic, filled with the final preparations and a sense of looming anticipation. I tried to keep busy, focusing on the details of the ceremony, but my mind kept drifting back to Jack and the unresolved past he represented. As I was checking the seating arrangements in the main hall, Jack walked up to me, a smirk playing on his lips. The sight of him so close sent a jolt of anxiety through me. "Laura, you look like you could use some help," he said, his voice laced with a mock concern. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "I'm managing just fine, thanks." He leaned in closer, his smirk widening. "I can't help but notice you haven't told Michael or his family about our little history. What's the matter? Scared they might see you differently?" His words stung, and I felt a surge of anger. "That's none of your business, Jack. What happened between us is in the past, and it's going to stay there." "Oh, come on, Laura. We both know you're just trying to play the perfect fiancé. But deep down, you're terrified of the truth coming out," he taunted. I glared at him, my patience wearing thin. "You approaching me like this, talking to me, it's a violation of the court order. You're not supposed to be anywhere near me." Jack's smirk faltered for a moment, but then he laughed. "That old thing? Please, we're practically family now. Besides, no one here knows about that, do they?" I took a step back, feeling cornered. "I'm serious, Jack. You shouldn't be at this wedding. You need to leave." His laughter grew louder, echoing in the empty hall. "You really think you can keep me away? I'm a part of this family now, Laura. And as for the wedding, let's just say I've got a little surprise planned. I felt a chill run down my spine at his words. What do you mean by that? Jack winked at me. You'll see. Tomorrow's going to be a day to remember. The eve of the wedding was a blur of emotions. The house was filled with the laughter and chatter of arriving guests, but my mind was elsewhere, clouded with worries about Jack and his ominous words. As I was helping to set up the reception area, Michael came up to me, his face full of concern. Laura, you've been quiet all day. Is everything okay? I forced a smile, not wanting to burden him with my troubles, especially not now. Just a bit overwhelmed with all the preparations, that's all. Michael wrapped his arm around me. Hey, don't worry. Everything's going to be perfect. You just need to relax and enjoy our day. I nodded, wishing it were that easy to brush away the unease. I know, you're right. I'm just being silly. Later, as I was double-checking the guest list, Sarah approached me. She seemed excited, oblivious to the tension that was eating away at me. Laura, this is going to be such a wonderful day. I'm so happy for you and Michael. Thanks, Sarah. I'm really looking forward to it, I replied, trying to share her enthusiasm. As we were talking, Jack walked past us, giving me a knowing look that sent a shiver down my spine. Sarah noticed my reaction and frowned. Is something wrong, Laura? I shook my head quickly. No, nothing. I just thought I forgot something on the list. Sarah seemed satisfied with my response, but I could tell she was still a bit puzzled. Well, if you need any help, just let me know. After she left, I took a moment to steady my breathing. The thought of facing Jack tomorrow, on what should be the happiest day of my life, filled me with dread. That night, as I lay in bed, the house quiet and still, my thoughts were a whirlwind. I contemplated telling Michael everything about Jack, but the fear of ruining our wedding held me back. I didn't want our special day to be overshadowed by the ghosts of my past. But as I tossed and turned, Jack's threat echoed in my mind. What surprise did he have in store? And how could I protect myself and my future with Michael from whatever Jack had planned? The morning of the wedding dawned bright and beautiful. As I got ready, surrounded by my bridesmaids, there was a buzz of excitement in the air. But beneath my carefully applied makeup and styled hair, anxiety gnawed at me. Laura, you look stunning, exclaimed one of my bridesmaids, Lily, as she helped me with my dress. Thanks, Lily. I just hope everything goes as planned, I replied, trying to sound upbeat. Everything will be perfect, you'll see, she reassured me, giving my hand a gentle squeeze. As the ceremony time approached, my heart raced. Walking down the aisle, I saw Michael waiting for me, his face lit up with love and happiness. For a moment, all my worries melted away. This was our day, and nothing was going to ruin it. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and tender moments. As we were pronounced husband and wife, the room erupted in cheers. But as we turned to face our guests, my eyes involuntarily sought out Jack. He was clapping, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. At the reception, the atmosphere was festive, with guests enjoying the food and music. Michael and I mingled, laughing and thanking everyone for coming. But as I looked around, I noticed that Sarah and Jack were missing. Have you seen Sarah and Jack? I asked Michael, trying to sound casual. No, I haven't. They're probably just taking a break from the crowd, he said, not seeming concerned. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. Jack's words from yesterday echoed in my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder what he was up to. As the evening progressed, the absence of Sarah and Jack became more noticeable. Michael's mother, Mrs. Richardson, looked worried. I've been calling Sarah, but she's not answering. It's not like her to miss something like this. I'm sure they're around somewhere, Michael said, but I could tell he was starting to get worried too. Just then, the doors to the reception hall burst open, and Sarah stormed in, her face red with anger. The room went silent as everyone turned to look at her. Laura, this is all your fault, she yelled, pointing a finger at me. I was taken aback, my heart pounding in my chest. Sarah, what are you talking about? She was seething. You seduced my husband in college, and now you're trying to ruin my marriage. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Murmurs and whispers filled the room as guests tried to make sense of what they were hearing. Sarah, that's not true, I protested, my voice trembling. Jack was the one who... But I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. Not here, not in front of everyone. Michael stepped in, his voice firm. Sarah, you've got it all wrong. Laura didn't do anything. Let's talk about this privately. But Sarah was beyond reason. No, everyone needs to know what kind of person she really is. As the argument escalated, I felt my world crumbling around me. The secret I had kept so carefully was now out, but twisted into a version that painted me as the villain. I looked at Michael, his face a mix of confusion and concern, and I knew I had to set things right. But before I could speak, another voice cut through the chaos. It was my father, his voice authoritative and calm. Everyone, please, can I have your attention? The room quieted down as he stepped forward, his police badge visible on his jacket. There's been a development outside that I need to inform you about, he said, looking directly at me with a reassuring nod. I braced myself, not knowing what was coming, but trusting my father to handle it. Little did I know, the truth about Jack in the past was about to come out in the most unexpected way. The room fell into a tense silence as my father stood there, his presence commanding attention. Everyone's eyes were on him, waiting for him to speak. Earlier today, the police apprehended a man outside this venue, he began, his voice steady. This man was found to be in violation of a restraining order, specifically one that forbids him from being near my daughter, Laura. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Sarah's face went pale, and I could feel Michael's grip on my hand tighten. The man we apprehended is Jack Thompson, Sarah's husband, my father continued. Sarah looked shocked, her eyes darting between my father and me. What? But that's impossible. Jack wouldn't... My father held up his hand to stop her. I'm afraid it's true, Sarah. Laura was granted a restraining order against Jack in college after he repeatedly stalked and harassed her. I felt the room spin as all eyes turned to me. The secret I had tried so hard to keep hidden was now out in the open, laid bare for everyone to see. Laura, is this true? Michael asked, his voice filled with concern. I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. Yes, it's true. I didn't want to ruin our wedding. I thought I could handle it. Sarah was in disbelief. But Jack told me you were the one who pursued him in college. He said you were obsessed with him. That's a lie, I said firmly. He was the one who wouldn't leave me alone. I was scared, Sarah. I had to go to the police. Sarah looked at me, then at the spot where her husband had been standing earlier, a look of realization dawning on her face. My father continued, Jack has been taken into custody for violating the court order. I'm sorry to bring this up on such a happy occasion, but it was necessary. The room was filled with murmurs as people processed the news. Michael's mother came up to me, her eyes full of sympathy. Laura, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. Michael hugged me tightly. I wish you had told me, Laura, but I understand why you didn't. I'm here for you no matter what. Sarah approached me, her expression remorseful. Laura, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I was fooled by Jack. The revelation had turned the wedding into a scene of confusion and disbelief. But amidst the chaos, I felt a sense of relief. The truth was out, and I no longer had to carry the burden alone. My past with Jack was finally brought to light, and now I could start to heal and move forward with the man I loved, free from the shadows that had haunted me. The rest of the wedding night felt surreal. After the revelations and the drama, the mood had shifted significantly. Yet, amid the shock and confusion, there was a sense of coming together, as if the truth, however painful, had brought a strange kind of unity. Michael and I sat together, hand in hand, as the guests slowly started to engage in quiet conversations around us. Laura, I'm so sorry for everything you went through, Michael said softly. I wish I had known. I squeezed his hand. It's not your fault, Michael. I should have told you. But I was afraid of how it would affect us. Michael looked into my eyes. Nothing about this changes how I feel about you. I love you, Laura, and we'll get through this together. His words were a balm to my troubled heart. I leaned into his embrace, feeling a sense of peace for the first time that night. Sarah came over, her eyes red from crying. "Laura, I can't tell you how sorry I am. I was so blind." "It's okay, Sarah," I said, reaching out to touch her arm. "You didn't know." She took a deep breath. "I'm going to file for divorce. I can't be with someone capable of what Jack did. And thank you for being so brave." As the night drew to a close, my dad came over. "Laura, are you okay?" I nodded. "Yes, Dad, thanks to you. You always know how to protect me." He smiled gently. "That's my job, kiddo. Always." The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Sarah filed for divorce, and Jack faced legal proceedings for violating the restraining order. Michael and I went on our honeymoon, a much-needed escape from the chaos. As we walked along a beach, hand in hand, I felt a sense of closure. The ordeal with Jack was finally over, and I could start a new chapter of my life with Michael. "Laura, what are you thinking about?" Michael asked, looking down at me. I smiled up at him. "Just how lucky I am to have you, and how much I'm looking forward to our future together." Michael pulled me closer, kissing my forehead. "Me too, Laura. We have our whole lives ahead of us, and I can't wait to spend every moment with you." As we stood there, watching the sunset, I knew that despite the challenges we had faced, our love had prevailed. The future was bright, filled with new beginnings and endless possibilities. Jack was a part of my past, a dark chapter that had closed, allowing me to step into a future filled with love, hope, and happiness.
I stood there, numb, as the last clump of dirt hit the polished wood of Dad's coffin. The cemetery was filled with a quiet sort of sadness, the kind that fills your chest and sits heavy on your heart. Family and a few close friends were scattered around, their faces somber, eyes glistening with unshed tears. I glanced at Mom. She was calm, too calm. It was as if the whole thing, Dad's death, didn't really touch her. I wanted to believe she was just strong, but a small voice in my head whispered doubts. As people started to leave, offering me sympathetic looks and awkward pats on the back, I felt more alone than ever. Then there was Uncle Joe, Dad's brother, who came up to me, his face etched with grief. "He was a good man, Emily," Uncle Joe said, his voice rough with emotion. "He loved you a lot." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Dad and I were close, the kind of close where words aren't always needed. After the funeral, I headed back to Mom's place. It felt weird calling it just Mom's now. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that screams in your ears. Mom was in the kitchen, making tea, as if it was just another day. "Mom, are you okay?" I finally asked. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "Yes, dear. I'm fine. You know how your father and I had our differences, but I'm fine." That was Mom, always brushing things off, never wanting to make a fuss. I wanted to push, to ask more, but I knew it was pointless. A couple of weeks later, I was at work, trying to bury myself in mundane tasks, when my phone rang. It was Mom. "Emily, you won't believe who's here," she said, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Who?" I asked, a sense of unease starting to build. "Your sister. Anna's come back." Those words hit me like a ton of bricks. Anna, my older sister, the family's black sheep. I hadn't seen her in years, not since she left home at 22 in a blaze of anger and rebellion. Why is she back?" I managed to ask. "Oh, you know your sister, always full of surprises," Mom replied, as if Anna's return was the most natural thing in the world. I hung up, my mind racing. Memories of Anna, her wild ways, her constant battles with Dad, flooded back. She was the storm to my calm, always stirring up trouble, pushing boundaries until that one fateful night. I shook my head, trying to clear it. Anna was back, and I had no idea what that meant for us, for Mom, or for the fragile peace we'd built in her absence. But one thing was for sure, nothing was going to be the same again. Driving to Mom's house, my mind was a whirlwind of memories, each more vivid and chaotic than the last. I remembered Anna, my older sister, always the storm center in our otherwise calm family life. She was like a live wire, unpredictable and dangerous. Anna's teenage years were a blur of rebellion. I recalled the smell of marijuana sneaking under her bedroom door, the clink of beer bottles in the dead of night. She would bring home different guys, laughing too loud, the music from her room drowning out the sounds of our family's disapproval. Dad used to argue with her, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. "You're throwing your life away, Anna." He'd yell, but she'd just scoff and roll her eyes. He tried everything, grounding her, pleading with her, but nothing worked. Mom was different. She never confronted Anna, always making excuses for her. "She's just a teenager. She'll grow out of it," she'd say to Dad, her voice tinged with an unspoken blame. It was like a silent war between them, one that grew more intense with each passing day. The worst memory, the one that still haunted me, happened when I was 10. Anna had come home drunk, more so than usual. I was asleep, but the sound of her stumbling around, cursing under her breath, woke me up. The next thing I knew, there was smoke. Thick, choking smoke filling the hallway. Anna had knocked over a candle in her room, and the fire caught quickly. I remember screaming for Dad, the fear paralyzing me as he rushed in, his face set in determination. He managed to put the fire out, but that night changed everything. Dad's patience had reached its limit. "I can't do this anymore. You have to leave," he told Anna, his voice breaking. The fallout was immediate. Mom turned on Dad like I'd never seen before. "How could you throw her out? She's your daughter," she cried. Their relationship, already strained, fractured that night. Anna left the next day. She didn't say goodbye, didn't look back, and just like that, she was gone. We didn't hear from her, not even a call or a letter. Dad tried to find her, but it was like she'd vanished. Now, years later, as I pulled into the driveway, my heart pounded with a mix of fear and unresolved anger. How could Anna just walk back into our lives as if nothing had happened? As I stepped out of the car, the weight of the past settled on my shoulders, a burden I wasn't sure I was ready to face again. The air was thick with tension as I sat across from Anna in our old kitchen. Her presence, after all these years, felt like an intrusion, a disruption of the fragile peace we'd maintained since she left. "Why now, Anna? After all this time, why show up out of the blue?" I asked, my voice laced with a mix of curiosity and accusation. Anna looked at me, her expression one of indifference. "I heard about Dad's death. Thought it's about time I came back, see what I'm entitled to from the inheritance." Her words hit me like a slap. "Entitled? You didn't even bother to show up for his funeral, and now you talk about inheritance?" "Yeah, well, Dad and I never got along. Can't say I was sad to hear he's gone," she retorted, her tone harsh and unapologetic. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her blatant disrespect for our father, her greed, it was too much. "You're unbelievable, Anna. You come back after years, not to mourn, but to claim what you think you're owed?" My voice rose, tinged with anger and disbelief. Mom, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "Emily, that's enough. Anna has every right to be here. She's family." Family? She's been gone for years, not even a call, and now suddenly she's family? I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. "Emily, I won't have you speak to your sister like that. She's been through a lot," Mom said, her voice firm, siding with Anna. Anna smirked, as if pleased with Mom's defense. "See, Mom understands. I'm back now, that's what matters." The conversation left me feeling like an outsider in my own home. Anna's blunt dismissal of our father's death, her eagerness for the inheritance, and Mom's unwavering support for her. It was all too much to take in. As I left the house that day, my mind was a whirlwind of anger and confusion. The return of my sister had reopened old wounds, and it seemed like the battle lines were being drawn once again, with Mom firmly on Anna's side. A week later, we were all seated in the living room, the air heavy with anticipation and unspoken thoughts. The lawyer, Mr. Jennings, cleared his throat, preparing to read Dad's will. Anna sat upright, her eyes sharp and calculating. Mom looked nervous, wringing her hands. I just felt numb, not sure what to expect. "Let's begin," Mr. Jennings said, his voice formal. "I am here to read the last will and testament of Mr. James Harrison." He started with the usual legal jargon, but we were all waiting for the main part, the distribution of the assets. My heart raced as he finally got to it. "To my daughter, Emily Harrison, I leave the family home and a sum of $2 million. I gasped, unable to believe what I'd just heard. The room went silent, the weight of the revelation sinking in. "And to my daughter, Anna Harrison, I regretfully leave nothing due to her estrangement and actions that have caused deep pain to this family." Anna's face contorted with rage. "What? Nothing? This is bullshit." Mom's face was a mix of shock and disappointment. "James, how could you?" she whispered, more to herself. Mr. Jennings continued, unfazed by Anna's outburst. "And to my wife, Mary Harrison, I leave a monthly allowance to ensure she is cared for." "That's it? A monthly allowance?" Mom's voice was tinged with disbelief and hurt. Anna slammed her hands on the table, standing up abruptly. "This is unfair. He had no right to cut me out like this." I found my voice. "Dad made his decision, Anna. Maybe if you'd been here, been part of this family, it would have been different." "Shut up, Emily. You always were the golden child, weren't you? Dad's little favorite." Anna spat, her eyes blazing with anger. Mom turned to me, her expression one of betrayal. "Emily, can't you do something? Share the inheritance? It's what your father would have wanted." I shook my head, feeling a mixture of sadness and resolve. "I can't believe you're asking this, Mom. After everything, Dad's wishes should be respected." Anna stormed out of the room, cursing under her breath. Mom looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, then followed Anna out. Left alone, I sat there, the magnitude of the situation washing over me. My relationship with my sister and mother had been strained before, but now it felt irreparable. Dad's last wishes had not only divided his assets, but also deepened the rift in our already fragmented family. I braced myself as I approached Mom's house, but nothing could have prepared me for the chaos that unfolded before me. The living room was a disaster zone, littered with empty bottles and trash. Anna was in the center of it all, her laughter sharp against the backdrop of loud, blaring music. "What on earth is this, Anna?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the noise. Anna looked up, a sneer on her face. "Look who decided to show up, the millionaire heiress." Her friends eyed me with a mix of curiosity and disdain. I ignored them and turned to Mom, who sat quietly, looking lost and overwhelmed. "Mom, how can you let her do this?" Mom's response was a mere whisper. "She's just trying to cope." Cope? By turning our home into a bar? My anger was rising, fast and hot. "Oh, please, spare me the lecture," Anna slurred, her face inches from mine. "You always were Dad's little princess, but now I'm taking back what's mine. Let me have my fun." "This isn't fun, Anna. It's a disaster. You need to leave," I said firmly. That's when Anna's face twisted into a sneer. "Make me leave, Emily. I dare you." I took a step forward, but before I could say anything more, Anna's hand flew up and struck me across the face. The slap echoed in the room, a stark, painful sound. I touched my cheek, disbelief and pain mingling on my face. That's it. I'm calling the police. Anna's laughter was cold. Go ahead. Call them. See if I care. I dialed the police, my hand shaking with a mix of fear and anger. As the officers arrived, they assessed the situation quickly. Anna's bravado crumbled as they led her away, her protests and insults trailing behind her. I expected Mom to be shocked, maybe even relieved, but her reaction stunned me. How could you do this to your own sister? Mom accused, her eyes filled with tears and anger. She slapped me, Mom. She was destroying your home, I protested, still reeling from the slap and the surreal turn of events. Mom shook her head, her voice trembling with emotion. She's still my daughter, and you've turned against her. I stood there, speechless. The police car drove away, taking Anna with it, and the reality of what had just happened sank in. My own mother, siding with Anna after everything that had just transpired. As I left the house, the weight of Mom's words and Anna's actions hung heavily on me. The rift in our family had deepened, perhaps beyond repair, and in that moment, I felt more alone than ever. The days following the incident were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. The image of Anna being led away by the police and Mom's accusing words haunted me. I felt torn, unsure of my next move. Sitting in my quiet, orderly living room, I called my best friend, Laura, needing someone to talk to. Hey Laura, it's Emily. I don't know what to do. Laura's voice was gentle, a soothing contrast to the turmoil I felt. What happened, Em? I recounted the events, my voice wavering as I relived each painful moment. Emily, you can't keep doing this to yourself. You've done everything you can for your family, Laura said, her tone firm yet kind. But Mom, she sided with Anna. After everything Anna did, I replied, the hurt evident in my voice. Sometimes, Emily, you have to think about yourself. You can't fix everything, and you can't keep sacrificing your well-being for them. Her words hit home. I knew she was right, but the thought of cutting ties with my family, especially Mom, was overwhelming. I know you're right, Laura. It's just hard to accept. It is hard, but sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones we need to make for our own good. Laura's words stayed with me long after we ended the call. I knew what I had to do, as painful as it was. I couldn't let the chaos and dysfunction of my family drag me down any longer. A few days later, I visited Mom. She was cold, distant. The warmth that once defined our relationship seemed to have vanished. Mom, we need to talk. I started, my voice steady but my heart aching. About what, Emily? Have you come to take more away from me? Her words were sharp, cutting. Mom, I came to say that I can't keep doing this. What happened with Anna, your reaction? It's too much. I need to step back. Mom's face hardened. So you're abandoning your family, just like that? It's not abandoning, Mom. It's about self-preservation. I can't keep being the one who fixes everything, especially when it hurts me. Mom looked away, her expression unreadable. If that's your decision, then so be it. Leaving Mom's house that day was one of the most difficult things I had ever done. The finality of it, the sense of a chapter closing, was almost too much to bear. But as I drove away, I knew deep down it was the right decision. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of relief, a weight lifting off my shoulders. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was one I needed to take for my own sake. The news that Mom and Anna were living off the meager allowance Dad left in his will was a shock. I couldn't shake off the image of them struggling, so I decided to see it for myself. What I found was far worse than I imagined. Their apartment was in a rundown part of town, the building worn and uncared for. Inside, the scene was dismal, the air stale with the smell of cigarettes and alcohol. The floor was littered with cigarette butts and empty bottles, a testament to their daily life. Anna was sprawled on a shabby couch, her face flushed from drinking, a bottle clutched loosely in her hand. Mom sat beside her, her once meticulous appearance now disheveled, her eyes dull and resigned. "Mom, how can you live like this?" I asked, my voice a mix of concern and disbelief. Mom looked up, her eyes narrowing. "We manage. We don't have the luxury of a fancy house and money, like some people." Her words stung, but I pressed on. "Mom, you can't stay here. It's not safe. Come live with me." Mom's laugh was bitter. "Oh, now you want to help? After everything, you just waltz in here and expect us to jump at your offer?" "It's not like that, Mom. I'm worried about you," I pleaded. Anna stirred, her voice slurred but venomous. "She's just trying to ease her guilty conscience. She got everything, and we got nothing." "I'm not the enemy, Anna. I'm trying to help," I said, frustration mounting. Mom stood up, her body trembling with anger. "Help? Your father and you've done nothing but look down on us. You think because you have his money, you're better than us?" "Mom, please. It's not about the money. I just want you to be safe." I tried to explain, but my words fell on deaf ears. "No, Emily. You made your choice. You chose his side over your own family," Mom said, her voice laced with scorn. I looked at them, at the squalid apartment, at the life they had chosen. I realized then that my offer, my concern, meant nothing to them. They had made their choice, and so had I. As I left, the door closing behind me felt like the end of an era. The pain of their rejection, the harshness of their words, and the reality of our broken family hit me all at once. Walking away, I knew this was the last time I would try to bridge the gap between us. It was time to let go, not out of indifference, but out of a need to find my own peace. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk, free from the shadows of a past that I could not change. In the months that followed my decision to walk away from Mom and Anna, I found myself grappling with a mixture of emotions. There were moments of intense loneliness, punctuated by feelings of liberation. It was a strange, bittersweet freedom. One evening, as I sat in my living room, the silence not as oppressive as it used to be, my phone rang. It was Laura. "Hey, Emily, how are you holding up?" she asked, her voice always a source of comfort. "I'm okay, Laura. It's been tough, but I'm getting there," I replied, a hint of resolve in my voice. "You know, Em, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the best outcomes. You're strong, and you'll get through this." Her words were a reminder of the strength I had found in myself, a strength I never knew I had. "Yeah, I'm starting to see that. It's just, I miss them, you know?" "It's natural to miss them, Emily. But remember, you're moving forward for a reason." Laura was right. I had made a choice, not just for my well-being, but also to break free from the cycle of dysfunction and pain. In the following weeks, I threw myself into work and started volunteering at a local community center. Helping others brought a sense of purpose and fulfillment that I hadn't felt in a long time. One day, while organizing a charity event at the center, I met Tom, a co-volunteer. His easygoing nature and sense of humor were refreshing. "You're doing a great job, Emily," Tom said as we set up tables for the event. "Thanks, Tom. It feels good to be a part of something positive," I responded, smiling genuinely for the first time in what felt like forever. As we worked together, Tom and I shared stories about our lives, and I opened up about my family, something I hadn't done with anyone in a while. "It sounds like you've been through a lot, but you're turning it into something good," Tom said, his eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and empathy. "Yeah, I guess I am," I said, a sense of pride swelling within me. As the event came to a close, I realized how far I had come. The journey hadn't been easy, but it was mine. I had faced my family's shadows, the pain, and the turmoil, and emerged stronger. Moving forward, didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant learning from it, growing, and finding joy in new beginnings. It was about embracing the uncertainty of the future and the possibilities it held.